Welcome back to my channel. Today we're diving into the thrilling psychological drama Mother's Instinct from 2024. This intense story explores the complicated friendship between two women, Celine and Alice, whose lives unravel after a tragic accident shakes their families to the core. Stick around as we break down every twist and turn in this gripping tale. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a video. The story begins with two women, Celine and Alice, who live side by side and share a close bond, almost like sisters. Each of them has a young son. Celine's boy is Max, and Alice's is Theo, and both boys attend the same school. One afternoon, while Celine was picking up the kids, Alice quietly slipped into Celine's home. Though it seemed a bit suspicious at first, Alice was setting up a surprise birthday party for Celine. When Celine returned, she was genuinely shocked to find friends and family gathered to celebrate. Alice gifted her a stunning pearl necklace, symbolizing the strength of their friendship. Between their houses was a small gap in the hedge, through which Max and Theo crawled to visit each other. But when Alice noticed the boys were missing, panic set in. Her worry grew deeper knowing Theo suffered from a severe peanut allergy, which could be life-threatening if he came into contact with peanuts. Max happened to be carrying a box of peanut cookies, making the situation even more dangerous. Thankfully, Celine located the boys and coaxed them back home by offering a piece of cake. Though Theo was well aware of his allergy and wouldn't eat peanuts, the whole incident left everyone uneasy. That evening, both families gathered for a joyful night of drinks and dancing. Conversation turned to politics, where Celine and her husband admired Alice's sharp and insightful views. They soon learned Alice had once been an investigative journalist, explaining her keen intellect. Celine and her husband encouraged Alice to return to journalism, but Alice's husband, Simon, was hesitant. He believed their finances were stable and preferred that Alice take on lighter work, like contributing to the school newspaper. Simon's true concern stemmed from Alice's past struggles with anxiety and depression caused by the pressures of her former job. He feared she might suffer again if she returned to that stressful environment. The following morning, Celine mentioned that Max wasn't feeling well and chose to keep him home from school. Later that day, while Alice was trimming flowers in her garden, she glanced up and saw Max standing precariously on Celine's balcony, dangerously close to the edge. Max was trying to hang a birdhouse he had made for a school project on the balcony when Alice shouted at him to get down, but Max didn't listen. Alice tried to squeeze through the small gap in the hedge to reach him, but it was too narrow. She rushed around to the front of the house and called for Celine, who was busy vacuuming and didn't hear her. By the time Celine arrived at the balcony, it was too late. Max had fallen from the railing, hitting his head and dying instantly. Celine was devastated, sitting in shock as she cradled her son's lifeless body, overwhelmed by sorrow. That night, Alice watched helplessly from her window as Celine broke down in tears, shattered by the tragic loss. The next day, Alice decided not to send Theo to school, thinking he might be affected by the tragedy. But Theo seemed surprisingly calm. Instead, he crawled through the hedge and sat quietly with Celine in her garden, where he and Max used to play together. It was as if Theo was trying to offer comfort. When Alice found him there, Celine didn't say a word. She simply turned and walked back into her house. Her silence made it clear. She blamed Alice for what had happened, believing she could have prevented Max's accident. Max's funeral was a heart-wrenching moment for Celine and her husband, Damien. Their grief was compounded by the fact that Celine had faced complications during childbirth and was no longer able to have children. Losing Max felt like losing everything. At the funeral, Theo noticed his favorite stuffed bunny placed beside Max in the coffin. Seeing the toy there upset Theo deeply, causing him to cry and throw a tantrum. Simon, Alice's husband, was frustrated, not understanding why Theo seemed more upset about a toy than the loss of his best friend. Alice, on the other hand, was hurt that Celine had put the bunny in the coffin without asking her first. She couldn't understand what Celine was trying to prove by that gesture. After the funeral, Celine withdrew from everyone and stayed away for a month. When she finally returned, she surprised many by attending a school event. She approached Alice and apologized for her earlier behavior, expressing a desire to move past the tragedy and start anew. She even invited Alice and her family over for dinner, but Damien was still deeply affected and stayed locked away in his room that evening, unwilling to see anyone. During the dinner, Celine returned Theo's bunny, explaining she had taken it earlier because she thought it might comfort Max in some way. Alice could see how broken both Celine and Damien were. Damien was drowning his sorrows in alcohol, unable to handle the overwhelming pain, while Celine, despite trying to stay strong, was quietly struggling too. No matter how much Alice tried to be there for Celine, her support seemed to make little difference. Celine remained trapped in her grief, and Damien stayed lost in his world. One afternoon after school, Celine asked if Theo could stay with her for a while, and Alice agreed. Later, while Alice was watering her garden, she noticed Theo standing on Celine's balcony. Though he wasn't doing anything dangerous this time, Alice still felt uneasy. She called out to him, but he didn't respond. Worried, Alice rushed beneath the balcony, where Celine was already looking up at the same spot in the hedge, where Alice had once struggled to get through when Max had fallen. This time, Alice managed to slip through the gap, but it felt like Celine was somehow recreating the whole situation, perhaps to test Alice. Nobody knew what was going through Celine's mind. When Alice shared her concerns with Simon, he dismissed them, reminding her of her past struggles with anxiety that sometimes made her imagine things that weren't real. After Theo was born, Alice had been hesitant to hold him for a long time, fearful that her anxiety might cause her to harm him unintentionally. As time passed, Theo's birthday approached. When Alice asked who he wanted to invite, the first name he mentioned was Celine. Theo's grandmother, Jean, also came to the party, but she became upset upon seeing Celine. Taking Celine aside, Jan told her that she shouldn't have come because her presence was casting a shadow over the day. Jean had once treated Celine like family, but now she wanted her gone. Celine was unsure how to respond, and even Alice seemed uncomfortable having her there. Just as Celine was preparing to leave, something terrible happened. Jean suddenly collapsed in the garden. Both Alice and Celine rushed to her side, but it was too late. The doctor later confirmed that Jean had died of a heart attack. Alice was confused. Jean had been diligent about taking her medication, so how could this happen? The doctor tried to reassure her, explaining that sometimes age brings unexpected health issues. Still, Alice wanted to be sure and requested an autopsy. The next day, while working in the garden, Alice found a bottle of John's pills. She hid it away, planning to have it tested later. That night, strange noises downstairs startled her. She hurried to Theo's room but found it empty. Her heart raced until she remembered that That night, Theo was safely asleep in Alice's room, but Alice couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Was she imagining things? A few days later, the autopsy results delivered a shocking revelation. Jean's medication was missing from her system. If Jean had been taking her pills as prescribed, the drugs should have appeared in her body. Something was wrong. Alice went to retrieve the bottle of pills she had found earlier, but now it was gone. At that moment, Alice became certain someone had swapped Jean's real medicine with fake pills to make her death appear natural. That evening, Alice and Simon visited Celine's house. Celine offered cookies, but Alice, wary, forbade Theo from eating them until she could check the ingredients. Celine warned that the cookies contained peanuts and suggested Theo find something else. However, Theo took a bite anyway and immediately suffered a severe allergic reaction. They rushed him to the hospital. When Celine and Damien arrived at the hospital, Alice lost control. She accused Celine of attempting to poison Theo. Simon tried to calm her, but Alice kept blaming Celine for Jean's death, insisting that Celine had stolen the pill bottle to cover her tracks and had planned everything. Simon was stunned. He had no idea Alice had secretly ordered the autopsy. He reminded her how her past fears and anxiety had sometimes caused unnecessary problems. Then something strange happened. As Simon stepped outside, he spotted the very same pill bottle lying in the garden, the exact spot where Alice had originally found it. Alice fainted, confused and shaken. She thought she had hidden the bottle in a drawer. Was she losing her grip on reality again? Or was her anxiety returning? One day when Celine was away, Alice entered her house without permission. They had once shared keys, but now Alice was snooping for answers. Before she could find anything, Celine came home, caught Alice inside, took back her house key and kicked her out. Alice didn't hold back, accusing Celine outright of switching Jean's medication and causing her death. The next day, Celine gave Theo a gift, but Alice angrily threw it in the trash. Feeling confused and sad, Theo climbed onto the same balcony where Max had once stood. He told Celine he wanted to be with Max and his grandmother. Calmly, Celine talked him down and brought him to safety. Watching this, Alice began to realize that if Celine had truly intended harm, she wouldn't have saved Theo. Things began to settle down. Alice and Simon decided to move away, recognizing that the situation had become too unhealthy. Alice broke the news to Celine, who was sad but understood it might be for the best. When Celine told Damien, he wasn't surprised, but seeing how emotional Celine was made him angry. He shouted at her, demanding to know why she. Damien, frustrated and angry, shouted at Celine, questioning why she cared so much about Theo and accusing her of moving on too quickly from Max's memory. Celine had faced complications during childbirth that prevented her from having more children, and Theo had come to fill the void Max left behind. Being around Theo was her only source of comfort. That night, Celine quietly drugged Damien with chloroform while he slept, then cut his wrist, staging it as a suicide. The next morning, Alice and Simon saw an ambulance outside Celine's house and heard about Damien's death. Everyone assumed it was the tragic result of his long battle with grief. No one suspected Celine. Celine locked herself away in her room for days. Alice and Simon believed she was simply mourning, but Celine was far from sad. She had brought the chloroform with her and had more sinister plans. Growing uneasy, Alice sneaked into Celine's house looking for answers. In the basement, she discovered medical supplies, pill bottles, and chloroform. The space looked more like a secret lab than a home. Terrified, Alice rushed back, but it was too late. Simon had already passed out after drinking something that had been spiked, and Theo was unconscious as well. Celine attacked Alice with chloroform. Despite Alice's desperate attempts to save Theo, she failed. Celine then opened the gas valves, cleaned up, and set the house on fire. The explosion killed Alice and Simon, but Celine spared Theo. She had other plans for him. Later, Celine applied for legal guardianship of Theo. The court, unaware of the truth, saw her as a grieving mother who had lost her son and was now caring for the child of her late friend. They granted her custody. In the end, Celine told Theo that they had both endured immense pain but would heal together. Theo smiled, unaware of the dark secret Celine had hidden and the terrible things she had done to make him hers. That's the full story of Mother's Instinct, a haunting journey of grief, suspicion, and the lengths a mother will go to protect what she loves. If you enjoyed this recap, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell icon to stay updated on all our movie breakdowns. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.